So Trump, half the world love him, half the world hate him. Has got himself into trouble again, Sean.
Very unhelpful comments this week where he's been effectively questioning NATO, questioning the whole role of NATO, questioning that people who aren't paying their dues, frankly, he turned around and said, wouldn't be protected by America, and almost be encouraging Russia and others to attack them. Face value, absolutely appalling. Part of the whole premise of NATO is that it provides a protection for a collection of countries. It's a team sport. It's all about an attack on one being an attack on all. And of course, all of this is because Trump is trying to play into a domestic audience, USA first, which is his mantra.
MAGA.
What is MAGA?
Make America Great Again.
Oh, there we go, yeah. But that's exactly what he's doing. And in American politics, they throw a lot of spears about. And, you know, the trouble is, if you go below that, I have to say I have a degree of sympathy with the essential elements of his argument, because we as our nation, we pay 2% of our GDP into defence. And back in 2014, NATO turned around and said all of our members should at least spend 2%. And by 2024, by the end of the decade, you should all be doing that. Today, of the 31 members of NATO, only 11 meet that requirement, with the US spending 3.5% of GDP. So understandably, they're looking going, hang on a minute, we're funding the defence, and we're the superpower involved here. Why should we be protecting countries like Italy that are refusing to pay their dues? And there is a point there, particularly when we've talked in the podcast, do we spend more money in defence? And if we do that, we've got to take it away from somewhere else.
I mean, I think the point you made about it being potentially political and national political, I think it's a good one. I think we're going to come on to it when we talk about the world's response to what Israel is doing in Gaza. So, yeah, I mean, in an election year, which is where we are in the US, people are after votes. You know, do you forgive him for that? Probably not. But the second thing is, I think it's very hard to actually see what people like Trump say, because his words are often taken out of context. So I think you need to listen to the sort of 5-10 minutes and then see how you feel about it. The third comment I make is that if you want to wake up a sleepy giant, which is what he may feel, you may disagree, that NATO is, you have to poke them quite hard to get a response. And it could be that's his sort of tactics, you know.
I agree. Bizarrely, I do agree. I think, first of all, NATO's been around for quite some time, 80 or 75 years. It's therefore not unreasonable there's a review of what it stands for. I personally, as a British taxpayer and a member of the military, former member of the military forces here, think before we start upping our defence spending, we should be making sure other members of the club are meeting their requirements. I think that's entirely reasonable. But I also think that there has been and it's a bit dangerous ground here, but I think there has been a degree of complacency in Europe about America's so huge, it spends huge amounts of money on defence, they're funding NATO, what's the risk to us? Then all of a sudden Russia invades on the European continent. And there's a lot of countries like Poland suddenly upping their defence spending that are going, oh, crumbs. Now, it's a bit late then, because you can't suddenly create a robust defensive capability overnight. So I do think there is value in sometimes shaking the tree a bit. And the other thing, I think it's called the Weimar Triangle, was a defunct partnership arrangement between France, Germany and Poland. They all had a vested interest in trying to make sure that, because they're at the heart of Europe, is safe. And they're now re-instigating a whole series of conversations to see whether there's merit in actually Europe taking a bit more of the lead in defending Europe, which I think is probably healthy. It's not a bad thing.
So maybe, because it's very easy to find negatives about Trump and, I guess positives as well. Maybe we give him a break to start a conversation, which we're going to track and see how NATO responds.
I think it's a really good example of something where the soundbite, exactly as you said, we get attracted by the soundbite and pour scorn on, but actually below the surface, there's actually subliminally a really positive message. And I think, as you say, we're going to come on to another one of those with Grant Shapps later, but it's really important.